Hi there, I'm Dani, spiritualtherapist.com, and today I am extremely excited and very honored to bring on the amazing Dr. Michael Salla, a man that doesn't need much introduction at all, a man who is absolutely prevalent on and off planet in the subject and the art form of exopolitics. Dr. Michael Salla, welcome, darling.
Thanks, Dani, for having me on your show. And I love what you've been doing. It's really great. And I'm happy to be able to contribute to this growing awareness of ET contact.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so kind of you. I really wanted to start today by asking you, initially, where did you grow up in the world?
Well, I was born and raised in Melbourne, Australia, and working class family. And it was a pretty dysfunctional family, like a lot of families these days. So not much to talk about there. But I do remember around the age of 10 or 11, there was a kind of transformation in my life, and things suddenly started to shift. I became very interested in extraterrestrial life, and I got interested in Eric von Daniken's work. At that age, and also the Day the Earth Stood Still. That was a film that really kind of almost like somehow I found it and watched it at that age, and it just kind of lit me up that there's something to this. And so that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to meet the space people. So from that age on, from around 10, 11, I had this burning desire to meet the space people. So I realized that I needed to finish high school, even get degrees to become an astronaut. So that's what I did. I got through high school and eventually tried to join the Royal Australian Air Force, thinking that if I want to be an astronaut, I've got to be in the Air Force. And I tried twice. The second time round, they accepted me as a navigator. But in the end, I decided that no, I actually want to be a pilot, because navigators don't become astronauts, pilots do. So I continued down my journey of finding out who I am. And around the age of 24, 25, I went through a kind of spiritual awakening. This was in the kind of mid 1980s, and I got interested in Indian philosophy, interested in paranormal research, psychical research. I remember reading two books, Lyle Watson's Supernature and Raynor Johnson's The Imprisoned Splendor. And those two books really opened me up to this incredible journey that we can take within to find out who we are. So I did go down that path, and I had some really incredible experiences. Met my guide. I was told about my guide, who was an Indian guru, and he was someone who had ascended in his life, and he was here to advise me on what to do. And I'm thinking, and at that point I was kind of reading all of the Indian classics, and I'm thinking, okay, I need to go to India, go to an ashram, and kind of like become a monk to get into that lifestyle, to be able to develop, say, these high states of nirvana, samadhi. That's what I was really interested in, reading people like Ramakrishna, Aurobindo, Vivekananda, Paramahansa Yoga. So I was really into that at that time. And so I was shocked when this Indian guru that was actually being communicated with through a friend of mine who was a channel, and she was communicating with my friend and I, our guides. He had a Buddhist guide, I had an Indian guide, but they were friends. So he told me that, because I'm thinking, okay, I want to go to India, I want to join an ashram and reach these heightened states of consciousness. And he said, shocked me, he said, no, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to go back to university, and you're supposed to get higher degrees and begin working in political philosophy. And so I was told that in the 1980s. And so I had to literally go back and get myself a Bachelor's of Arts degree. I had to get a master's degree in political philosophy. Then I had to get a PhD in government. And that was all because I was told back then that I needed to do this stuff, that my life's mission was to get those high degrees so that I would become a teacher, and rather than like a monk in some Indian ashram. So that happened in the 1980s. So that was a kind of fascinating experience.
Wow, that's an amazing synopsis. Can we go back to when you were age 10 and you said there was transformation happening? I want us to put a vision in our minds of who little Michael was. Was he an outgoing child? Did he have siblings? And what was his bedroom like? And were you ever visited? Did you have any spiritual experiences around that time? Did you ever have any alien off-planet extraterrestrial connections?
No, I have a very poor memories of what happened because it was a very dysfunctional family, very dark. I think I was very sensitive to forces in my household, and because it was so dark, there were very heavy negative energy spirits. So I think I just kind of shut off those abilities, just deadened myself because I was so frightened of all of these dark entities. So I just kind of shut off those abilities.
Right.
But at around 10 or 11, something happened where I began to open up to this higher presence or these extra dimensional forces. But now it was more of a light nature, or more of a kind of positive extraterrestrial nature. I didn't have any encounters at that time. I just remember that I became very, very interested in meeting the space people. And I kind of remember a very kind of interesting incident where it was almost like meeting Casper the Ghost. I don't know, you don't know, maybe you do know Casper the Ghost, but in my generation, we grew up with Casper the Ghost. And I remember seeing or meeting some being like that in my early childhood, but it was very hazy. It's not something I clearly recollect. I just remember meeting some kind of being like that. But of course, now I know that could have been a kind of a control memory, a screen memory to hide a real encounter. But I would say up until the age of 10 or 11, I had very negative experiences that made me shut down my psychic abilities, my empathic abilities. And around 10 or 11, I began to kind of like slowly open them up as I became interested in extraterrestrial life. And, once you become interested in extraterrestrials, you start to open up to the cosmos. But of course, I had to reach an age where I guess I was maybe a little more developed cognitively, so that I could choose, okay, this I accept, this I don't accept. So I think that's what was going on at that point.
That's fascinating. When you talk about having an awareness of feeling negative, heavy entities in the house and the home, and assuming that the way you're describing, you were more clairsentient, meaning you had clear feeling, or were you also clairvoyant, where you could actually see shadows, spirits, shapes, and orbs, or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say there was a little bit of both those clairsentience, clairaudience, but I think I shut them down, but those abilities, because I could always feel things, very sensitive as a child, very empathic. But because my family was so dysfunctional, that those were abilities, or there were kind of very dark presences, and I had to shut down those abilities. Otherwise, I was terrified of those. I mean, I remember waking up in the middle of the night, just paralyzed, hearing these things, hearing these presences around me, and I'm just kind of paralyzed, not able to move. So I think I just learned to shut them down, which I don't think is very uncommon. I think a lot of people go through similar things.
100%. I did too. My house was so dark then, so haunted. It was a horrible experience being a child and being so clairvoyant and growing up and seeing all of that. And you mentioned that you had an episode where there was a complete transformation. You don't have to discuss it. You can keep that private if you choose. But I love that you were cognizant of the fact that you went from dark, heavy energies to a more light presence. Do you want to share what that transformation was?
Yeah, it happened when I was about 10 or 11. And yeah, things shifted quite dramatically. As I said, up until that time, I remember, I had a bad stutter. I had this really bad stutter, and I was tremendously introverted. But around 10 or 11, I just became very curious about extraterrestrial life. And I think there was, I think more of me came online, and I actually was told that more of me came online at that time. So yeah, that was kind of like a metaphysical event around that age, 10 or 11. And yeah, I was told more about that, but I don't want to talk about exactly the specifics of what happened. But yeah, definitely more of me came online at that age. And I was very interested in extraterrestrial life from that time on, and did everything I could to become an astronaut because I wanted to meet the space people. And that was, something that helped me get out of a very kind of dysfunctional, kind of impoverished background, single mother, with, I mean, not really affluent at all, just struggling, but yet I was able to kind of like keep up reasonable grades so that I would finish school, and then eventually was able to get into a top tier university. And, in Australia, thankfully, the government was very supportive of people who come from that lower socioeconomic background. And so I didn't get a scholarship at that time. I just got state support, that the state would actually support students from impoverished backgrounds to get into university. You would get a kind of like a minimal income, and you wouldn't have to pay fees. I mean, that's very different today, but back in the late 70s and early 80s, that was the situation. So I'm very grateful for that kind of system that existed in Australia at the time.
Yeah. I love how you say and reference them as the space people in your mind as a little boy, as opposed to aliens or extraterrestrials. And I think that using language like that in real time now helps people have more of an opening and awareness that they are people from other civilizations and planets. We were just told there was no one else out there. Now we absolutely know it's a complete lie, and has been for a long time. Did you, when you were a little kid, did you go outside with a telescope? Did you look up? Did you ever see anything that you thought was slightly strange or an anomaly?
No, I don't remember seeing anything like that. It was more an intellectual curiosity rather than having physical encounters or anything like that. It was just driven by my being open to things that I was seeing, whether it was a movie like Day the Earth Stood Still, or it was a documentary on Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, which came out around that time. So I saw that documentary around that time, and it was something that really kind of intrigued me. So that really began this process of slowly opening up.
That's excellent. I want to go forward a little bit to the time when you encountered around 24, this Indian guru type person. Now, was it somebody giving you a reading and downloading information from this person who influenced you not to become a monk or not to go and live in an ashram? Or was it an actual presence that spoke to you?
It was my guide. It was a person, a lady, a friend of ours. My friend and I, we were doing the kind of like new age scene, going to all these yoga classes, visiting various kind of like spiritual centers, going to the Theosophical Society in Melbourne, Australia. They had a center there. So, we were into all those things. Whenever there was a visiting Indian guru coming through Melbourne, we would see them. So, during that time, it turns out that my best friend's partner, she was clairvoyant. and she started to see our guides, and then she began talking to them. And so she told me about my guide, very tall Indian guru who lived around the 6th, 7th century AD, and he had achieved ascension within 2 lifetimes. But he was very much one of these political gurus, if you like. I mean, a person who had achieved a very high spiritual awareness, but had also been influential in the political arena. So India has this great tradition of like rishi kings or politically active gurus who advise government leaders on proper policies and so forth. So he was one of these beings, and he wanted to influence me down that direction. And he wanted to get me away from the idea of going to India, becoming a monk at an ashram, and just like, no, go back to university. And he actually said, you've got to get your PhD in studying political philosophy. And he said, there were 2 people that I had to study in particular. He said Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. He had said I had to study those 2 people in particular in university and get my PhD. And that's what I did. It took me from kind of like mid 1980s, from around 1984, right up until 1993 when I got my PhD. So it took me close to 10 years to go through the whole process of because I had a science degree and I couldn't write. I was a terrible writer. I mean, could not write for anything. And so I had to learn how to literally write an essay. What was a comprehensive analysis of a article, what was to be able to analyze the arguments and flesh those out. I had to learn from scratch. I had to get a bachelor's degree in arts and work my way up again to a PhD. So that took 10 years, but I did it and finished with the PhD. And that's when this career began in peace and conflict resolution.
Oh, peace and conflict resolution. That's so wonderful. What a beautiful expression. Can you touch a little bit on what exactly is political philosophy so our audience can have a bit more of an understanding?
Well, it's where there's an understanding of what are the key principles of politics and how these relate to a philosophy of life. So a political philosophy, it's more than just a set of policies. It's more about an overarching framework for understanding life all around us. So, for example, say Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, that's a political philosophy. It's just not a set of prescriptions that you apply. It's a political philosophy. You live it. You look around you, and you analyze life from the perspective of the accumulation of capital, the control of the forces of production by a certain class. So that's the Communist Manifesto. That's a political philosophy. Or say classical liberalism, where you live by the idea that people need to be given freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to worship, freedom of religion. So that's the classical political philosophy of liberalism, where you look at people like, say, Edmund Burke or James Locke and those classical political philosophers who espoused these principles. So so political philosophy has a kind of overarching life or overarching understanding of what it is about politics and how it informs our worldview of life.
It seems to me that pretty much everyone I can think of and imagine running countries, presidents, prime ministers, senators, governors, leaders, etc., all above and in between and so below, could have definitely done with a really in-depth education on political philosophy, because that seems to be missing the heart of love for humanity wherever I look, and I know billions of people feel the same way right now. That seems to be fundamentally missing in our society of brothers and sisters across this beautiful planet that we live on, that belongs to us, all of us, the people. I'm so excited to really find out more about you, and thank you for explaining. You're such a good communicator. You know, the fact that you studied these humanitarians, Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and I feel like that whole kind of equilibrium of love filling you up and then moving forward and then delivering this amazing body of work, that you've been doing this, reporting, working with the military, governments and off-planet personnel for over 30 years. So when you first started, you know, delivering exopolitics, who were the influences of the time and who were you connecting to at that time?
Well, my exopolitics career really began in 2001. And up until that time, I'd been working as a professor in international peace and conflict resolution. And one of the things that I was really very curious about was, you know, what is it that drives international conflict? Why is it that people of goodwill get together, come up with solutions to conflicts, and then when they put those solutions together, somehow they fall apart? And I realized that there were forces in play that sabotaged the best efforts of peace researchers or those that were trying to promote peaceful outcomes to conflicts around the world, because that's what I was doing. And I had studied with the best people and had gotten grants from major institutions. And I was working on some conflicts in East Timor, Kosovo, Sri Lanka. Those were some of the conflicts that I was working on. I did field work in those different places too. So yeah, these were war zones. So I went in there and I always felt safe. I never felt threatened, but you know, these were war zones. I was arrested once and so kind of went through all of that and always felt that, okay, I need to understand what is it that is driving these conflicts? Because that was one of the things that I took away from my study of Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi, because they both stood for kind of minority rights. Of course, for Gandhi, it was the rights of the Indians who were being dominated by the British. And of course, for Martin Luther King, it was the African American or Black Americans who were dominated by a segregationist system. So I was very interested in that. And so my career was all about finding out, you know, what is it that drives these conflicts? And, you know, by around 2001, I was very disgruntled. I was very unhappy because I realized that everything I was doing felt like a waste of time. You know, that even though you could come up with the best solution for an international conflict, because we did that. I worked with a team of people and we came up with a good solution for the East Timor conflict, but it all fell apart in 1999. And I realized that there was something at play that I didn't understand. And so in 2001, I was really looking for answers. You know, what is it that's really driving international conflict? Because up until that time, I was pretty conventional. You know, I believed that the truth, you'd listen to you'd read the New York Times or watch CNN or read the Washington Post, and you get the unvarnished truth. Mm. That was the belief I had at the time. So I was very conventional. But in 2001, I saw the Disclosure Project press conference that was organized by Stephen Greer, and that really opened up this new door, this door of exopolitics, where it's like, oh wow, there's something else going on here, that there are these forces operating behind the scenes concerning UFOs, extraterrestrial life, black budgets, government cover-ups, that all of these things are happening behind the scenes. So this is why, you know, the world is so screwed up. It's not because there aren't good plans being thought up, and it's not because there aren't good people around to implement those plans. It's because the system is so screwed up. It's because the system is dysfunctional. It's not that people are dysfunctional and, you know, we just got to help them come up with solutions. It's like the system is dysfunctional. It doesn't allow conflict to be resolved. So it perpetuates conflict because that's the cover for raising enormous amounts of money for a black budget so that you could build these secret space programs without the public learning about it.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. I mean, for me, it's all about the humans who have been running things, those with and without souls, who have tried to keep humanity down and controlled and insulted the world by saying humans aren't ready for extraterrestrial contact, or of course we are and were. You know, they did a really terrible job in trying to cover that up. It's like too late, cat's out the bag. When you were going around the world into war zones, or when you were bringing peace and conflict resolution to people in these very, you know, harrowing situations, was there a particular country that you visited that appeared to you slightly more evolved than others? And if so, which was it? And what were the kind of, you know, the kind of core values that they had that may have, you know, revealed that to you?
Well, you know, the countries I did the field work in were, these were war zones. So there were refugees, there was a lot of destruction. I was kind of particularly impressed by Sri Lanka because it has a very ancient culture. And of course, you had Buddhists fighting against a Hindu minority. That was the war, the civil war that was going on there. And I felt safe. That was the interesting thing. You know, I was clearly an outsider, you know, Caucasian, and Southern Indians are very dark. So I stood out, but I felt safe. I didn't feel, you know, even though these two sides were in a war against each other, I still felt that there was a kind of civility there, that they could understand, they could appreciate an outsider coming in who was interested in what was going on and wanted to learn about it and help in some way. So, and that really kind of like, and I guess probably the same thing, because I spoke to people that work with, say, the International Committee for the Red Cross, Peace Corps volunteers, humanitarian organizations that were operating in places like Sri Lanka or East Timor or Kosovo. They were all outsiders and they were all there trying to help. And that really kind of impressed me, especially in Sri Lanka, that, you know, as an outsider in the midst of this civil war where terrible things were happening to people, you were safe. It didn't matter whether it was Hindus or if it was Buddhists. If they came across you, they would treat you very politely. They would kind of like, there would be this kind of like understanding that you were someone that was not part of their conflict, and they would want to present their case to you. So yeah, Sri Lanka, that was a place where I felt particularly safe. East Timor was the same. Kosovo was a little different because because these are Caucasians fighting against Caucasians, so it was very. You didn't stand out as being very different, but definitely in East Timor and Sri Lanka, yeah, I stood out as different, and that was a form of protection as well.
Did you connect with and work through or alongside any part of the departments of the United Nations?
Yes, I did do some work with the UN. I did some consulting, and we got some UN people to come to events that I was organizing, especially when it came to East Timor, because we got some very high-level people involved from the US State Department, from Australia, from East Timor, from Portugal, and from the United Nations. And so these people came in, and so we shared ideas with them. And this helped the United Nations come up with a plan to resolve the East Timor conflict. And so that actually, so some of the work we did kind of filtered into this plan that eventually was released by the United Nations in 1998 for a plebiscite. But the situation had changed so dramatically at that time that plan, even though a year before it was very progressive, by 1999 it was regarded as something that was maintaining a certain element of the status quo. But certainly the UN was a part of that.
That is absolutely mind-blowing. What a body of work, and what a career and a journey. And it sounds to me from everything you're sharing that there's a part of you that's just following his heart, following his soul, following his passion through all of this.
Yeah, that's definitely what's been going on. I was following my heart, following my passion. And in 2001, when I realized that the peace and conflict resolution wasn't going to work, I was looking for some other way of understanding international conflict and what would work. And of course, the more I learned about the extraterrestrial cover-up, the more passionate I became about it. And like, I just then began, I was forced out of the university. I mean, I was told point blank, if you introduce this extraterrestrial topic into the university, you won't have a career. And so that's what I did. I just introduced it and I was forced out. So I went from being a full-time academic with a salary to publishing articles on a website and selling books and attending conferences and trying to make ends meet that way. So that took a long time. But as you know, when you follow your heart, eventually it turns out for the better. But up until that time, it truly is life on the bleeding edge, because the money's not there and you struggle, and it takes a long time. And I'm very grateful that I met a beautiful woman in Hawaii and who I ended up marrying, Angelica. And she, she's my soulmate. She believes in the same things as I do, and that's how we met, because she also had these interests, and that's how we met. And she's been, we've worked together ever since we met in 2004, and so that's fantastic. And that I think is one of the benefits of following your heart. If you follow your heart, then the right person comes in. You find your soulmate, and if you don't follow your heart, then that doesn't happen. Or if it does happen, you're not ready, and you screw it up, because that happens too.
Yeah,
people do mess that up. So it's like, so if you follow your heart and you get everything in line with your life in terms of what's important to you, then the person comes in who resonates with you at that level, and then you can create. And she's done some incredible things herself. She's a book author, and she's worked with some incredible healers around the world. In particular, she's worked with someone called Bratso. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a very famous healer from Croatia. So she's done some amazing stuff, and I helped her with that. So yeah, this has been a really wonderful partnership where we helped each other.
That's beautiful. I'm so glad you have each other in this life, because it's certainly has been very precarious for people in this realm, often on planet information, hidden technology, disclosure of other brothers and sisters from other planets. And I love that you two just kept on going and shared your metaphysical love and soul passion together. And like a lot of people, you did not sell your souls or give in to the paycheck or the pressure of the system that, thank goodness, is dying and falling apart right before our very eyes. That's just amazing. When you were looking at subjects in disclosure for extraterrestrial and off-planet life, what were the main ones that you saw being covered up that you really wanted to talk about?
Well, the one that really fascinated me, and it was the one that got me sacked from the university, was President Eisenhower meeting with extraterrestrials in 1954. I mean, that just totally blew me away. That not only was this topic something that was being covered up, but presidents were actually meeting with extraterrestrials, and that they were negotiating agreements, and that this kind of galactic diplomacy was happening behind the scenes. So it just truly fascinated me. And so I began to write about it. And so my first book came out in February in 2004. And someone from the Washington Post, a reporter, Peter Carlson, interviewed me, and they wrote a feature article for the Washington Post, and it appeared on the front page of the style section of the Washington Post. And they interviewed the university. They interviewed my superior at the university about it, and they were very upset with me because they said, well, we don't want to be associated with this topic of extraterrestrial life, because as an academic, normally if a top tier newspaper like the Washington Post writes a feature story on your research, I mean, that's something to be celebrated. In my case, I was threatened. I was told, if this comes out and they say anything that demeans the university, you're out, your career's over. And that's what they did. As soon as the article came out, they told me not long after that my position was not going to be renewed, and that the program that I was trying to launch was cancelled summarily. So that was it. I was on my own in 2004, and I had to really establish a new career. And as it turned out, I mean, and the universe looks after you, because this happened in August. That in August, my position ran out, that I had to literally leave the United States, go back to Australia, because my position had run out. The university was cutting all its association with me. My visa was over, would run out. And so in August of 2004, just before I leave the US to go to Australia, I was invited to this workshop in Hawaii, organized by this lovely lady, Joan Ocean, that swims with the dolphins and organizes galactic diplomacy seminars. So she invited me to be a part of that. So I go to this seminar, and I met this incredibly beautiful, tall, blonde gal, and Angelica, and it's just like, wow, fall in love right from the beginning. And it's like, and I didn't, and that was it. So it was like the universe knew. I kind of felt that the universe was guiding me all the time. So one door closed, one door slammed shut with a big slam, and another door, a beautiful door, opens up, and I enter into this tropical paradise where all of a sudden I'm swimming with dolphins. I'm living with this beautiful lady. We get married, and it's life in Hawaii. Eventually I start surfing, and it's a wonderful existence. So yeah, it's just magical how one door closed and another door opened.
Yeah. I know it was a long time ago, but honestly, I know back in the day, to have a feature article on a person, a scholar, an academic, scientist, to have a full page in the Washington Post at that time was such a big, huge, mega deal. And so I feel really proud of you for that, because it was a hell of an achievement. I'm sad that the university didn't have the balls to actually be open-minded enough, but we do and have found that with a lot of kind of academics, this academic snobbery. No, let's stay with one agenda. Oh no, let's not go there. Let's try and control, humanity, which again has completely failed, thank goodness. So during your time in Hawaii, obviously you're again in a very spiritually, evolved indigenous environment. Did you develop more spiritually? Did you have any extraterrestrial connections, or what was the kind of growth period there like for you?
Oh yeah, totally. It was very much a growth in terms of awareness, sensitivity, and training. And swimming with the dolphins was incredibly opening, and with the whales too. I got to swim with the whales here in the Big Island. And they are non-terrestrials. They are incredibly intelligent. And when you're with the dolphins, I mean, all these psychic abilities start coming online. People start, there's healings. People start spontaneous teleporting. Incredible psychic events happen with people. I just felt the dolphins helped me connect with this kind of joy, the joy of life. They really helped me with that. So there was a lot of healing because I mentioned the dysfunctional family background. So there was a lot of healing with the dolphins. But the whales, I mean, when you're in the presence of these whales, they are truly, I mean, they clearly are non-human. but there's a presence, there's a universal force there. And, their brains are much larger than human brain. And they are communicating with extraterrestrials all the time. And the language, the way the dolphins communicate, the way the whales communicate, when you're in that frequency, it wasn't just like for a few weeks, for more than a dozen years, we were like in that frequency on almost on a daily basis, swimming with the dolphins. And it was incredible. So that was definitely a time of awakening, opening up. I'm starting to see extraterrestrials, I'm starting to see UFOs. And I'm writing about the extraterrestrials, and you would know when you're writing about extraterrestrials, when you are putting out material about different extraterrestrial civilizations, the positive ones and the negative ones, you establish a psychic connection to them. So with the positive ones, that's no problem, because it's joy and love. But when you're writing about negative extraterrestrials and you're trying to understand, well, what are the draconians? What are the greys? What are the insectoids? What are they all about? And you're truly opening up because you want to connect with these to understand them. If you have not had a very strong spiritual background, and I did have that from 1985, I had a very strong spiritual background. I had a meditation practice for 30 years. Meditating regularly. So I had that. And then I'm swimming with dolphins, swimming with whales. So, I built up a very strong spiritual armor around me. So when I'm now into around 2003, 2004 and 5, I'm now writing about the different extraterrestrial groups, finding out what the different reptilians, what the different greys are doing, what the secret government is doing, what the cabal is doing. Psychically, I'm opening up to those energies. But because I had developed my spiritual armor from the 1980s, it was like I was impenetrable. They couldn't come in. And it was the same with my wife, Angelica. She's the same. She's from around 5-6 years old. She's been communicating with angels, and she worked as an angel healer and reader and all of that stuff. So she had that background. So the two of us combined our energies. So, we have this very strong vortex around us. So, I'm not at all threatened by these dark groups. But as a child, up until the time I was 10, 11, yeah, definitely. They came in. I didn't know how to protect myself. And it was like open season. I was just totally shut down. But I learned how to protect myself since the time I was 10, 11. So it was a journey.
Yeah, bless your heart. Yeah, and I so understand that, beginning that life, because I lived a very similar, as we mentioned before we got on this recording, background, and just sharing stories back and forth. So one thing I want to share with you, you mentioned the whales. I too have such a draw to the whales and the dolphins. Not a particular whale. I mean, I would say maybe humpback whales first of all, but followed by blue whales. So I had a dream. When you have a lucid dream, for those that don't know, is when you're having a dream and you wake up in the dream and you go, oh my God, I'm awake. My test inside of a lucid dream is always to pinch myself as hard as I can. If it hurts, I'm awake. If it doesn't, I'm obviously in a dream. So I'm in this dream and I wake up and I'm in the ocean. I don't know what ocean I'm in, but I'm in the ocean and it's dark. And there's two other people around me. I don't bother looking down to see if I've got legs. I know I'm human at the top, and I look up and there are 3 massive, gigantic, huge ships. And everyone, the other people in the water are looking up to, and we're waiting. And all of a sudden, the very underneath shutter opens and a blue whale drops in. Then the next one opens and a blue whale drops in. And then the third one and a blue whale dropped in the ocean. And in my mind, and I could feel the wind blowing on me like it was so real. And I remember having conscious awareness of that in this moment inside this lucid dream. And I remember saying to myself, oh my God, that's how they got here. And then one time I'm hanging out on FaceTime with my friend Alex Collier, who's another long-term Andromedan contactee, abductee, beautiful, beautiful man. I love Alex. And I was telling Alex about this dream, and he said, Dani, the whales are from Uranus. You know, that was his kind of take on it, you know, and that was just so mind-blowing. Oh yes, and then the other day, I'm making notes as you're talking as well, because you're so like, you know, firing me up with questions and connections. I think it was you the other day on a broadcast, and by the way, A+, mate, your broadcasts are first class. They are so beautifully written, so elegantly delivered. And you obviously do so much research and matching up, you know, the different technologies, the militaries, the governments, the informers that you have, which we're going to come to. And it's just so beautifully done. So thank you. But you mentioned the book, The Only Planet of Choice. Remember? That was you, wasn't it? And I'm like, oh, I read that book when it first came out, like in the 90s, like in 95, maybe 96, something like that. And I found it so mind blowing. And Phyllis, the lady that wrote it, was discussing the Council of Nine. There's councils of nines and fives and threes and 12s. And we know that there's light councils and there's all different kinds of, you know, beings that people connect with, and whether they're illusion or they're real, you know, who are we to say at this point? But I remember specifically portions of that book that spoke about Atlantean times, and that when the people of Atlantis were so dysfunctional, like a lot of dysfunctional hierarchical people that put themselves in senior positions are, they were experimenting on animals and children. They were doing all of these nefarious acts that they had no right in doing. And so long and short of it, Atlantis was taken down as a civilization that stretched thousands and thousands. People think it's like one little island off Santorini. It so isn't. It was such a massive part of the world. And the people, the good people that didn't want to go down with Atlantis, they say some of them became dolphins. And there were also experiments with human DNA and fish DNA, and some other people in that same book also refer to potentially they are the remaining beings from Atlantis. What say you to that idea?
Well, fascinating. I mean, I know that the dolphins definitely higher dimension, represent a higher intelligence. I mean, their origins, I mean, I've heard it said that they're from Sirius B. Also, yeah, that's interesting. Uranus. I mean, Atlantis, I hadn't heard of that they are the reincarnations of some Atlantean souls. But I mean, it's very, very possible. I know The Only Planet of Choice, I mean, that is a fascinating book, and it's actually something that I'm looking at very, very closely for my next book. Phyllis Schlemmer kind of like talked about the Atlanteans as being an offshoot of one of the 24 primary extraterrestrial civilizations. In The Only Planet of Choice, they talk about 24 extraterrestrial civilizations that are responsible for seeding humanity, and that they're kind of like our custodians or our protectors. And Atlantis was actually one of the civilizations established on Earth that was tied into one of these 24 civilizations, and that was called Altea. I don't know if you remember that. So Altea was one of these 24 extraterrestrial civilizations, and so Atlantis was tied into that. And so Atlantis, yeah, went through this decadence. I mean, it went through a long period of flourishing and contributed incredible things, but also went through a period of decadence and darkness where they did all of these terrible experiments.
Yeah.
So yeah, Atlantis definitely is a major part of our history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again and again. So hidden, was it Plato? Was it Socrates that had the writings on, and people are going off in this direction and mapping out that direction? And again, all such coveted hidden information, which is most definitely coming to the fore. Right, I forgot we were recording for a minute, but I got another really quick story, because you know our beautiful friend Elena Danan. you know, the very well-known, very affluent, contactee Pleiadian connector to the Galactic Federation of Worlds. So I was telling her, we were hanging out, me, her, and Megan Rose, we were hanging out on Friday night, chit-chatting. And I can't believe she had this actual book on her shelf. And I don't know why it dropped into my head, but I was telling the girls that a while ago, I got this is what country was I in? I was in America, and there are some. I was selected with a couple of other kind of spiritual medium, clairvoyant, therapy type people to do a daytime show that had never been done in America before. But of course, you know, it didn't happen because no, let's not encourage people to use their metaphysical skills and grow and follow their hearts and souls. But anyway, and one of the directors that was filming, and it was a real professional outfit. This woman, she knew I could read, and so she wanted me to come to her house. She was very upset. And I'm not going to say the name of the book, but it is a book you have, and it's kind of Interview with an Alien, basically, is the book. So you probably know the book I'm talking about again, but it's not about ever putting anyone in an uncomfortable situation, because I don't do that. I don't roll that way. But this was amazing to me. So this beautiful lady is a serious, well-known director. Her father has a long-term legacy, big name in Hollywood. She wanted to make this film about one of the aliens that survived the crash at Roswell, apparently. So, oh my goodness, the woman's talking to me, and she goes, I've got this real issue, and this project is funded, we've cast it, but it's just not happening. And I said to her, oof, and I got all hot, and I'm like, oh, there's something really wrong with this. There's something wrong with the material. She's like, will you come to my house? And will you, like, I've got the book at the house. I'm like, okay. So I went to her house, and she hands me the book. And I just opened the book and I held it to my heart, and I was freezing cold and had such a violent reaction to it. And I said, there's something terrible about the way this book is written. It is full of lies. It is dark. There's something humanity has done. Something is infiltrated. That's why your film's not being made, because the benevolence aren't going to allow bullshit and more controlling systems for humanity to come out. It turned out that she also gave that book to a friend of hers to read. And he said, oh my God, do you not realize that all the way through this book is the blueprint of the Scientology entire program? So I went on. Are you frozen, darling?
No.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
I'm just intrigued by what you're saying.
I know, it's so amazing. And anyway, she was very upset, and she did some digging, and sure as shit, some of the people that helped write and put the information together were trying to influence humanity and get more recruits for Scientology. Why do that? Why take a potentially real story of an extraterrestrial being, whether it was a gray, whether it was a benevolent, we don't actually know now because they screwed it up, you know, humans. It's like, sit your ass down, stop messing around, you know, you're done. Love will always come through. The truth will always come to the fore, right?
Yeah, that's great, what you just said, because it was interesting. I read the same book, and I felt there was something wrong with it. I felt that there was lies, and, you know, I can go through the lies, but it was like I just was able to see the inconsistencies in what was being argued. I mean, but you intuited it, and that's great, and with a lot of clarity. So that means you've got very sharp intuitive skills, which I'm not surprised, which is, you know, why you're supporting Elena and Megan, because, you know, they're the real deal, as I do. It's just interesting. Your journey seems to be much more that intuitive knowing and understanding, whereas I tend to have more, you know, that research perspective, where I'm able to, like, look at the different ideas and how they're put together and find, okay, there's problems here, because, yeah, there is still also that intuitive, because you can't have the analytical without the intuitive, because then, I mean, you don't get anywhere, because that's what a lot of people have in academia. You know, they're very analytical, but their intuitive abilities aren't developed.
Yeah.
And so they're forever trying to understand, you know, they get stuck on these kind of post-structuralist theories where, you know, everything's a wordplay and there's no ethical relativism. It's, you know, they get lost. And that's how they're so easily manipulated without realizing it. So you got to have the analytical as well as the intuitive. So you clearly got analytical abilities as well, but you've got very strong intuitive. And I come from the other side where it's more the analytical, but the intuitive is there as well. But I agree entirely that book, Alien Interview, there's an agenda there, and it's very, very clever.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think for any human, no matter what their experience is, if you read any body of work that makes you feel like there's some kind of a dominance or a dominion, or if you don't do this, then this is the consequence. Enough, no more. None of that has a depth of truth to it, because we're loving beings. Fundamentally, humans are loving beings. And the majority, well, I mean, so many of us, I don't want to say majority of us, but there are so many of us that are absolutely seeded from other civilizations. We know that. We have this awakening, this awareness, and more people are coming to realize that the governing bodies across the planet, largely the majority, are corrupt. And that love is coming up and burning through and lighting up the way. And people like you out there bringing information that some people go, oh, aliens, oh no, haha, titter, sit down and be quiet, please. But you do it in such an academic, brilliant, clear, you're so creative in your delivery, and you marry the spiritual, the metaphysical with the academic, with the hardcore, hardwired, technological proof of the technology that you also go into, on and off planet. Can you tell us what at the moment you're the most excited about on a technological aspect?
Well, I'm kind of really fascinated by this whole kind of evolution of a Star Trek future, that I think the benevolent extraterrestrials are helping humanity move into this Star Trek future, and that there are different groups involved in this, positive groups, positive extraterrestrial groups, positive human groups, that in particular the US Navy has been involved in this for a long, long time, that Gene Roddenberry, that he was a part of this as well in coming up with the whole idea of Star Trek. And of course, Gene Roddenberry was also involved with the Council of Nine. I mean, he asked some of the early questions to the Council of Nine. And in fact, I mean, he actually wrote a script, a film script called The Nine, that later on that was adapted by, I think it was Rick Berman and one other Star Trek producer, to come up with the series Deep Space Nine. This was after Gene Roddenberry died in 1990. Gene Roddenberry dies in 91, and in 1993, Deep Space Nine emerges, and in that movie, or in that series, the Bajorans is Earth, is humanity, and it represents humanity coming out of this very dark. I mean, the Bajorans come out of this very dark era where they're controlled by this kind of snake-like group of extraterrestrials, and now they're joining the Federation, but they have to go through a probation period. So it's the same with Earth. We're coming out of this very dark period, being controlled by reptilians, and we're going to go through a probation period to join the Galactic Federation. And this is what's happening right now. We're freeing ourselves. And this is very exciting, because this Star Trek future is something that is unstoppable. The US military is fully behind it. In fact, they identified the Star Trek future as the optimal future that they are working to create. And it's happening, and it all lines up with the information that Elena and Megan are putting out, and it all matches. So, because all of the technology that we saw in the Star Trek series, it's all real. It's not fiction at all. It's all real, and it exists out there. And it is actually something that is going to be bequeathed to us as a civilization, as we just open up and welcome that. And this is why I think what Elena and Megan are doing is so important, and why I've broken ranks with a former colleague, who I was supporting previously, because now we need to move beyond focusing on the problem. Because I was doing that, I was doing that, focusing on the problem from 2001 to 2021. I was focusing on the problem. And the thing is, when you focus on the problem, you put your energy into analyzing the problem and articulating it and raising awareness. On one level, you're doing what you think is the right thing, but on another level, energetically, you're feeding that problem. You're feeding the oppression. And I realized that what I needed to do now was to focus on the solution. And this is what Megan and Elena are doing, which is, and what James Gilliland is doing as well. I mean, and Alex Collier, they're doing it as well.
Yes.
Is you present the solution and you put your energies on that, because we all know what the problem is. We've been doing it for decades now, identifying the problem, but I don't want to talk about it anymore. I don't want to write about it anymore, because I understand at this point, just at this point, this is when we have to put all our energy into manifesting the positive future, which is this Star Trek future, which is why I'm fully behind what Elena and Megan are doing, because they are presenting that positive future. And of course they're being attacked because, people don't want to go there. They want to talk about the negative stuff. And it's like, no, the negative stuff is done.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know it. It's been analyzed to death. Let's now move to the positive stuff. Let's put our energy into that. Let's bring out the hope and the optimism in people, because that's where the solution is going to come, when we get people inspired, when we get them hopeful and optimistic about the future that is coming. That's what's going to happen. And Valnek and Thorhan and Ardana and Anax, all of these others, they know this, which is why they're putting out this positive vision, and why Elena and Megan's books are so important.
Their books, those women are such benevolent leaders. They have the hearts of tender 5-year-old little girls. They've been through horrific physical terrors that most people couldn't even handle understanding, and yet they have driven. They're through the arms of love. These women have stood up and said, this is what we believe. And you can always tell when someone's delivering information, is it coming from love? Are the people that they connect to in the Galactic Federation of Worlds, or people from the Pleiades, or these other beautiful star systems in our universe, are they being dominant? Are they casting down negativity? It doesn't take much thought to really feel into it. I wanted to go back a little bit to Gene Roddenberry, who created the Star Trek series. Now, Gene Roddenberry is somebody that we would refer to as a bleed through or a drip through, somebody who was in sleep time, going off in the astral, traveling, was being given information and visions, and he took those visions and created that beautiful body of work. So there are some people that go, because of their programming, they're programmed, oh, stop it, that's nonsense, don't go there. Well, you're crazy, you're a lunatic. We were given the future that's coming in the past. And even before Gene Roddenberry, we had Nikola Tesla. And again, not to get confused with Elon Musk and his Tesla battery lithium vehicles, not at all. Nikola Tesla is my absolute #1 hero on this planet. I cannot believe this man's body of work. And so one of his books, it is a series of articles and papers that he wrote as an inventor for Electronic Engineer or Electronic Magazine. I forget which one now, but it was way back in the 1800s. And he so wanted to educate the young men of that time, because there were no women, it was all men. It was, oh, it's a man's job, women go and put the potatoes on. Anyway, he was so diligent, and he would write. His writing is so beautiful, Michael. It is stunning the way he delivers in his own words. His experiences, his dad was a genius, his mother was a genius, and he went through so much hardship. But one of the things that blew my mind, because I've never read about anybody else in my life, and I'm not saying I'm like Tesla at all, but when you're a clairvoyant child and you're seeing everything, and you say, if I'm talking to you as a kid, I'd see things playing out, there'd be orbs coming, they would open up, there'd be a whole movie playing, and the person in front of me couldn't see what was right here. Tesla would literally see images coming in front of him, images of his coil, images of the multi-conductor machinery that he made, the high functioning machinery. It would play out like in physical real form in front of him. And then, the greatest tragedy for me, the one invention that he created, the particle laser beam that was supposed to be given to every single country on our planet as a means of defending said country from any kind of land, sea, or air attack. And what did the idiot arsewives in these countries do? They took his brilliant particle gun, laser gun, that would have protected and ended war. This is in 1900, for goodness sake. And they named it the Death Gamma Ray Gun. And he says in that book, I do not want to be remembered for this invention. And so I say, shame on you all, governments and politics and all your bollocks. How dare you keep that amazing defensive technology back? So then jump forward, we've got people like Gene Roddenberry then saying, okay, if you're going to have this repressive, hierarchical, and they're certainly not elites, hierarchical, then we're going to bring the information to the masses in different ways. So boom, here's Star Trek as a thinking, and then Star Wars as a thinking, to give us more awareness, open our minds. And then here we are now, we have people like you reporting on and off Earth information that nobody is disputing, unless they're one of these paid minions that are paid to go dislike, or these horrible little people doing these awful, nasty, mean, cruel things. And it is absolutely mind-blowing. And then people like Elena Danan and Megan Rose and Tony Rodriguez. Tony Rodriguez? Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah, I know Tony.
I interviewed him. I love Tony. Like, there are more, Alex Collier. I mean, they're friends. And gosh, am I missing others? I mean, Laura Eisenhower, Dwight Eisenhower's great granddaughter, Dwight Eisenhower, who you mentioned. All people need to do to really get a clue in some regard is to go back into the history books, because some of the information that you and I have discussed and that you've shared predominantly, it's all in the history books. Nobody made it up. Nobody just made it up. It actually happened. There have always been terrestrials working with governments on and off planet. They just thought humans were too stupid and they didn't want us to know. But it's too late, isn't it, darling?
Well, it's fascinating. You brought up Tesla and Roddenberry. I know that Nicola Tesla, he believed, and also he told one of his disciples, who there's this Arthur Matthews, who wrote a book called Wall of Light. And he said that he was a Venusian, and extraterrestrial. Tesla was an extraterrestrial, born or dropped off as a baby. This is one of the other things that happens, is that the extraterrestrials do drop off babies. I mean, this has happened again and again. They drop off babies, and those babies are raised in human society, and they become incredibly gifted people. So we know that was the case with Nikola Tesla. Now, Gene Roddenberry, I mean, the way you referred to him, I think as a bleed through or something, but yeah, he was definitely connected with this extraterrestrial realm, and what he did, I mean, was phenomenal, because even today, this is one of the reasons why I and so many others like to watch Star Trek, the different series, is because one of his principles that he really implemented was to make sure that none of this kind of interpersonal human drama that we take for granted would be part of the Starship or part of the Star Trek series. So you wouldn't have, like the commander scheming with the sub-commander to take over from the captain, and fighting and all these power games. There was always a harmony in the crew of the Star Trek series. And that was one of the things that Roddenberry implemented, because he knew that this was actually the way it was with the real life extraterrestrials. And if we're going to move into a Star Trek future, we need to do away with this, this interpersonal drama that we create amongst ourselves, that this was not something that would be part of the future. So that was something he did. So yeah, I think Roddenberry himself was connected in some fundamental way with the extraterrestrials, whether he's a bleed through, whether he's a baby drop off, or whether he just had contacts. But I think definitely he's someone that was working with the real Galactic Federation in coming up with these ideas of Star Trek.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely phenomenal. I could just speak to you for hours. It's such an enthralling and important subject. It's right where we are on the precipice of humanity awakening in all of her beautiful and his beautiful ways, and really accepting how incredibly royal and powerful each human is, how special and how valuable and worthy each human being is. And if anyone has never been told that, then you were lied to, because we are all so beautiful, and have this capacity for, empathy and love for each other and our on and off planet brothers and sisters. So let's move through to where you are now. Let's say the last 10 years. How has your work evolved, and what has kind of really been the driving force for you?
Well, what happened was in 2015, 2014, 2015, I became very focused on the whole secret space program series, focusing on people who had direct involvement with these secret space programs. So that's when my secret space program book series began. I think I've written 6 books now on the secret space programs. And that was really focused on the human reverse engineering of extraterrestrial spacecraft and all of the groups, all of the forces involved in that. So, it was very funny because from 2001, when I got involved with exopolitics, I was focused from 2001 up until around 2015. I was very much focused on extraterrestrials. I just could not let up on the different extraterrestrial groups. Then 2015 comes along, and it's like this one door closes and another one opens. Now all of a sudden, I'm not interested in talking about extraterrestrials anymore. I'm now wanting to talk about secret space programs. And so, going through the whole process of understanding which different military organizations develop what technologies, what different extraterrestrial organizations they were working with. So just going into the minutia of all of that, the Germans establishing a breakaway colony in Antarctica and working with the Draconians, just going into the finer details of all of that. So that was really my focus from 2015 up until 2021, recently, very, very recently. And then recently, again, one door shuts, another door opens. And so, I find myself going through these phases of life where all of a sudden, something that I was entirely focused on, all of a sudden, I'm no longer, I move on from that. It's not that I lose interest altogether, it's just that I move on. Another door opens up. And so now I'm focused not so much on extraterrestrials, but now I'm focused on extraterrestrial organizations. So now so my next book is going to be focusing on extraterrestrial organizations. I actually already have the title for it, Galactic Federations, Councils, and Secret Space Programs. It'll be book 7 in the series. And I'm very interested in the different organizations that are out there, talking about the Galactic Federation of Worlds, talking about the Galactic Confederation of Worlds, talking about the Council of 9, the Council of 24, and so on and so on. Just going into these different organizations and who they are, when have they been operating in human affairs, who were the principal individuals that first began to talk about them, and of course finishing up with what we're having today with the information that Elena and Megan are putting out. And right now, and it's very funny because just as Elena is talking about the Council of 9, having meetings with them, that is what I'm focusing on.
Yeah, that is just something so incredibly special. And again, all moving towards love. And I love that your original, academic training and schooling was, peace and conflict resolution. And now it's kind of coming around again in this phase that you're in now, so as a real driver and a leader of exopolitics, that being the overall name of the subject, but it's an umbrella of so many different elements of that. I just want to go back a bit to something that you said, because we don't want to upset Germany en masse. When Dr. Michael Salla is referring to the Germans, what he's referring to is after the Nuremberg trials, the Nazi Germans, who the scientists, the rocket scientists, the apparently brilliant brains, were given passes and allowed to go into America, Antarctica, Brazil, Argentina, Switzerland. Am I missing a country where they sent these buggers?
I think you got it, Paraguay.
Paraguay. So these awful, evil men, even though they had brilliant minds, they had really done such terrible atrocities on our beautiful, Jewish brothers and sisters. And so these Germans are the Nazi Germans, now over a 40, 50-year period are known as the Deutsch. And I've actually got a broadcast coming up with Brad Olson. We're going to reveal his Antarctica. Because for me, I'm on a journey, a very specific journey of bringing information in a slightly different way. And it's just such a fun journey. And all these amazing people are doing this real global leadership work and delivering all this information. And it's just so exciting. So when Dr. Michael Salla says Germans, he means the evil bastard Nazi ones that escaped, being tried as war criminals. So, sir, have I missed anything out in that little German narrative there, just so we bless the lovely German people and we don't insult them? Is there anything that I have neglected to say in that little bit there?
Yeah, we are talking about a breakaway German group, and we're talking about a group that was very much infused with Nazi ideology or the Nazi political philosophy, and thought that this was something that could be perpetuated secretly from South America and Antarctica, using all of these advanced technologies that they had received from these off-world extraterrestrial groups, especially the Draconians. And they began working with the US secret government, in particular the CIA, the Majestic 12 group, in creating this Hydra. I mean, this Hydra that we see depicted in some of the Marvel Avenger movies, that was real, that was a very real organization that up until recently was very, very powerful. But its wings have been clipped recently because of the Galactic Federation intervening with these other groups, the Ashtar Command and others, to really take action to remove the extraterrestrial influence on planet Earth, so that the positive military, the Earth Alliance, could work together and start removing these dark groups, such as this breakaway German group that established itself in Antarctica and South America. So yeah, we're talking about a breakaway group. And it truly did believe in things like slavery, and thought that slavery was something that had a place in the future. I mean, that's horrendous, but that's exactly what they thought. And this is something that was identified by some of the former Nazis themselves, like Albert Speer. He wrote a book called Infiltration. He was in Nazi Germany, he was the armaments minister under Hitler, and he was imprisoned at the Nuremberg trials. But he wrote a book after he got out called Infiltration, and said that the Nazis had planned for a post-war Europe to perpetuate slavery. So it wasn't a wartime exigency. It was something that was part of their political philosophy that would be extended. And what he was secretly saying between the lines was that this was what the breakaway German group in Antarctica were doing, and that they were continuing this slavery in the modern era. And that was their vision for the future.
You know, again, it's just such mind-blowing history. And I remember years and years ago reading that one of the very first voices ever broadcast off planet into outer space was bloody Hitler's at the Munich Olympic Games, when he's doing his broadcast around the world. They actually sent that frequency into space. you know. Oh my gosh, you know, I keep forgetting that we're recording. That's terrible. It's been such a good time chatting to you. Oh my God, so many different ways we could go. But I just want to, I know it's like an evening and, you know, you've got things to do. I want to just thank you so much. And just to round up, is there anything else that you would like to share that's come up as a thought, or any project that you're working on, or is there anything you want to say to the people of planet Earth?
Well, I think what I would say to everyone that's watching this, and if you're really interested is in changing the world for the better, is envisage where you will be in 10 years' time or 5 years' time. Envisage that that future will be one of your highest dream, your highest aspiration, a Star Trek future, something where we have open contact with extraterrestrials, and see yourself playing whatever role and establish a link with that future self. Your future self actually is part of this journey. Everyone that is listening to this, I mean, we all know about the higher self. We all know about the importance of connecting to the higher self, but your future self is also there as well. Your future self that is part of this Star Trek future. And it is living a future that today is a dream, a future where, you know, all of the things that we're experiencing now is like history, that the dark fleet or the deep state, all of these compromised politicians, all of these, this has been exposed and we've moved on. And we're living the good life with the advanced technologies. You know, we have like free energy, we have spacefaring technologies, we have the reverse healing or reverse age healing technologies, organ replacement, all of these things that are part of a Star Trek future. That is our future. So, you know, how can you bring that into this reality? Okay, one way is to envisage it, right? To think about it, but that's a little hard to do. But one thing you can do, and it's very easy, is to connect with your future self. Talk with your future self. It will communicate with you. So that future self in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, this is one of the things that I learned how to do. There was a medium or a channeler called Jane Roberts, and she wrote the Seth material.
Seth, yeah.
Exactly, the Seth material. And that was what she taught, connecting with the higher reality. So if you want to know how to do this, go to the Seth material, read the Seth material, and you can communicate with your higher self, and it absolutely works, because that's what I do. I communicate with my higher self as well, and it helps me go to places and experience things. And it's like, and I know that that's what's been guiding me. I mean, you know, people will say, oh, it's your higher self or God or whatever, or Jesus or whatever. It's your future self, because your future self is living in this post-conflict society where we are part of this future reality that is incredible. So you're there, that future self is there. So that's what I would encourage everyone to do, is connect with your future self and just try and feel the incredible life that they're living and how they are encouraging you to make the right choices now for how you can navigate this really incredible, treacherous time to end up in the right place. I mean, we just left Hawaii. We literally left a beautiful paradise because we knew something was going to be coming. And we've ended up in this place, Tennessee, just as winter is about to come in. And people will say, why would you do that? Why would you leave a tropical Hawaii to end up in Tennessee? Because my future self told me that this is the place to be for what's coming. And as soon as we got here, things have already begun. And I can absolutely understand why it's important for me to be here.
Wow, what a beautiful share. Thank you so much, Dr. Michael Salla. I could continue talking to you for another year. without stopping. There's so much to discuss, but I really hope you guys out there have enjoyed and really value this beautiful man, because so many of us do appreciate Dr. Michael Salla, especially being so public and being so brave and bringing his heart and his years and years of academia merging with metaphysics and science of today. Dr. Michael Salla, thank you so much. I give you so much love from my heart to yours. And to you guys reading and watching and listening out there, lots of love, and I see you soon.